but I'd really like us to get a chance to dig our teeth into, sorry, that's a rather violent metaphor, isn't it, to explore a real leadership issue. And for that, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Anita Sauvage, who's kindly agreed to present an issue which was a real issue for her when she was a team leader. So we're going to be using Act Learning today to take a look back at something with the purpose of helping Anita to learn from the past and think about what she could do for the future. I'm going to hand over to Anita for a moment now, just to introduce herself to you and say a couple of words about herself. So welcome, Anita.
Thanks a lot, Mandy, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anita Sauvage, and as you can hear from the sound of my voice, I'm not British, I'm French, and I've lived in Scotland for 19 years. I'm an organizational development consultant and a coach, and I've been for a very long time. And last year, I left NHS to build my own practice of development and coaching. And I have been trained by Action Learning Associate in 2008. I was in charge of developing a leadership program, so that's also the reason why the subject is so interesting for me. So we were trained, a few group of OD consultants were trained as action learning facilitator, and then we developed it for our leadership program. But from a personal perspective, I found it really, really useful, and I use action learning as often as I can in my practice. And I've joined, and I'm delighted that I joined Action Learning Associate in this summer as an associate.
And we're really happy to have you with us, Anita.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just check. I saw one comment in the chat box from Daphne saying that she couldn't hear Anita.
Oh.
And we've got a request, Anita, whether you could speak a little bit louder or to be closer to the mic. Would you just like to say something?
Okay. Is it better now?
I can hear you really well, Anita. Let me just check whether... And I'm hearing people in the chat box saying that they can hear you fine. That's fantastic. Thank you, Anita.
Okay. Thank
so
you.
Let me just introduce people to the process that we're going to use for this taster of action learning. In a moment, I'm going to invite Anita to describe the issue that she had as a team leader while we just listen. And then, when she's ready for some questions, and I'll check in with her on that, I'm going to invite you to ask your question by typing in the chat box. And Julie, our producer, is going to make the screen big so that we can have a few questions up there. We won't have to ask everyone to type their questions, but once we have a few questions, we're going to pause and invite Anita to pick a question and respond to it so that we all listen without typing any more questions. And if we could just go back to the slide for now, Julie, that would be great. So when Anita's ready for questions, you'll ask your question by typing it into the chat box. Anita will pick a question and respond to it while we listen. And then when Anita's ready, I'll invite more questions. We'll repeat steps 2 and 3. And then after about 20 minutes, we'll finish by sharing our reflections. Okay. So that's our process. I'll be signposting us through that as we go. So first, let's start by inviting Anita to just take a minute, Anita, to describe to us your issue while we listen. And you may need to unmute yourself, Anita. I'm not sure if you're speaking with your mic off. So tell us about your issue. Oh, I can just see Anita saying that she lost her connection. Okay, so we are going to get Anita back in a moment, hopefully. This is one of the joys of virtual action learning, that sometimes people's connections drop out.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, Anita. Welcome back.
What a perfect timing. I'm so sorry.
So tell us about your issue, Anita.
Okay, it's an issue that referred to the past, but it's something that stayed with me since. So I just thought it would be a good example to share and to reflect on. I was a team leader at the time, and I was looking after a team of 15 people. And one member of the team went off on sick leave for quite a few months. That was mainly because of a stress level, as her husband had been diagnosed with cancer. So she was away for almost 6 months, and when she came back, I referred her to occupational health, and we had a lot of discussion. And we agreed to reduce her hours and responsibility until she felt strong enough to resume her full job. So the following 2 months were quite challenging, not only for her, but also for the rest of the team. And that was very much because of her behavior. She was quite stressed, and we mentioned loud and ruthless earlier. She often argued with the rest of her team, and that was a real challenge for me. That was really, what do I do? Because I need to care for that lady because of her history, but I also need to look after the rest of my team. So I try a few things, offering her counseling, external counseling, and she tried that. We tried also coaching with her, and we had a lot of discussion. And in the end, because we were also going through a massive organizational change at the time, I was tempted to just find another job for her and to avoid the issue, but I just thought, no, it's not fair on her. So I refer her in what we call capability to try to help her find what would be more suitable for her. And she actually was very unhappy about that. And a few months after, she resigned. And I always felt, guilty and wondering if she resigned because of what I had done. So a slight feel of guilt. Yeah, I think it's a good word for me. But, for me, that was also looking after the rest of the team. So that's the situation. And what I would like for today is really to have time to reflect, on this and what I might do differently if that kind of situation was happening again.
You, Anita.
So I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you. Everybody else has heard Anita. Wonderful. So I'm going to invite Anita to mute her microphone now. And then I'd like you to type in, what question would you like to ask Anita? And as you're typing these in, Julie will turn them full screen so that we can see people's questions coming up. Some great questions coming here. What was the hardest part of this for you? What would your ideal outcome have been? We've got lots coming up. I'm going to ask people to pause there. Annabelle and Jeannie, please finish your questions. And Anita, I'd like you to scan through those questions that are on the screen, starting with Sonia's, What was the hardest part of this for you? Take a moment and pick whichever question you would like to answer first. And don't forget to unmute yourself. So I'm not sure whether Anita's thinking or whether she's in the process of unmuting herself. Just a word to Julie, our producer. Do we need to revert to the other screen for Anita to go off mute?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Anita, we can
Okay,
hear you.
thank you. Julie, would you mind now put the main screen again, if you don't mind? Thanks a lot. I was looking at the first few questions that came. The hardest part of this for me, oh, that's a very powerful question. I think there are two things for me that were very hard at the time. One of them is that that was her husband's illness, and I was recovering from cancer myself, and I'm fine. But at the time, I felt even more empathy for that lady, and I wonder how much it was clouding also my judgment and finding so many more excuses for her behavior. The ideal outcome for me would have been that she would not have left. She would have felt happy about it. But maybe at the time, I felt guilty also, thinking that she left, she's not happy. But maybe that was also a time to move on and to do something else. Maybe her priority had changed, and actually maybe the whole process gave her an opportunity to rethink what she wanted to do. And so in thinking that she wasn't happy, so she resigned, that maybe also again an assumption I made at the time. Looking back, is there something I wish I had done differently? I guess
I'm just going to invite, sorry Anita, I'm just going to invite you to pause there.
Okay.
You've shared a bit with us already.
Okay.
Oh, sorry Anita, can you mute yourself for a moment? Thank you. I just wanted to pause there because Anita's shared some really interesting information there. And I'd like to, rather than have Anita work through all the questions that are here, just check in with the rest of the group. Is there another question that you'd now like to ask Anita based on what she's just said? Please type in any further questions now, just to give Anita some more questions to choose from. So we've had a few more questions in for Anita now, and again I'm going to ask you to pause on the questions and ask Anita to choose which question now feels most helpful to you to answer. Anita, if you could just pick.
Okay, Julie, could you put the main screen back again, please? Thank you very much. I was looking at your question, Sonia, about helping me become more resilient and responsive. And thinking back, it's true that at the time, I didn't really seek any help from other managers. So that's not something I shared with other people except my own line manager, to try to get more insight. And actually thinking back, I'm thinking at the time I was already in an action learning set, and maybe that would have been a good question for my action learning set. I guess at the time I was thinking that it's so personal, but I wonder how much it was personal to me instead of being personal to that lady. So I think maybe having taken that to the group would have helped, but also maybe, someone earlier asked me if Jeannie, if I had supervision opportunity. And I had opportunity, but I didn't take them. So that's something, reflecting back, that I would work more on, is seeking help and helping other people, asking people to help me reflect on that. So Diane, you asked actually a great question about the other member of the group reaction. That's very powerful, actually, because I'm trying to revisit what happened at the time, and I wonder how much the rest of the team were supporting this lady. I felt very protective of her, but yes, actually, other people, maybe I didn't look at the way people were helping her or not, or challenging her behavior in a constructive way. Okay, so I will pause now.
Oh, I could hear some thinking going on there, Anita. So I just wanted to pause to again invite people, based on what you've just heard from Anita, what further question would you like to ask her? Hmm. And again, I know there are probably more great questions coming, but I'm going to invite you to pause now, questioners, and invite Anita to choose which question she'd like to answer next.
Yes, the questions are wonderful. Can you hear me? Okay, one of the question, you have so many questions and wonderful question. The question from Fiona, what's coming up as you experience it and reflect on it? It's a wonderful, wonderful question. Oh, there are so many things that are coming to my mind. One of them is don't beat yourself because you did the best with your ability at the time. And the human nature is so great in blaming ourselves, what did I do wrong? And actually, for me, as a leader at the time, I needed to think of the group as a whole. And I made the best of what I had in terms of my time and effort and empathy. I cared for that woman and I cared for the other people. So, yeah, I did my best. In terms of what I would do differently as a leader, maybe not try to be a superwoman, not try to please everybody, and try to be more honest and assertive with all the different people. So this lady and the rest of the team, and it's finding the balance between the two, and always think, well, do your best. I don't know if Mandy, if you want more.
Anita, I was just going to say, and if you wouldn't mind muting, thank you. I was just going to say this is probably a good point at which to hold this for now. I could hear from the pauses and the silences, which are very much part of action, and the slower pace of your voice, that some real learnings were coming out there for you. So, as facilitator of this, I'd just like to invite you to say what has been useful for you about this. What are you taking forward? And remembering to unmute yourself.
You're right. For me, it's amazing that just a few minutes and looking at your question, all your question, that's amazing to think about how you can still reflect on it. And for me, what I take from these 20 minutes is really to think that you can always learn from your experience, and you can still reflect on the same situation several times at different period of your life, and you will still learn things about yourself and the person you are. So yeah, that's wonderful. That's what I'm taking from it. And again, that's do your best, do what you feel is best for you and for other people.
Thank you, Anita. And I'd just like to finish that action learning session by inviting everyone to share in the chat box. What are your reflections now on this? Maybe something that you learned, maybe a piece of feedback that you would like to offer, Anita. What's one reflection from you from doing that work together? It may be something about the nature of working virtually that strikes you. Or it may be something specifically to do with the nature of leadership. So the power of questions over advice, choosing which question to answer. And it is interesting, Sally, to see that this can work quickly and powerfully, even virtually. And that was a really short period of time. I guess one thing that struck me was the power of vulnerability as a leadership quality, and also the power of compassion and the importance of compassion, and recognizing that what we do is never going to be completely perfect. Nicola's saying, being witnessed. These are fantastic reflections. There may be more coming, and that's fine if you want to keep sharing those, but I would just like to move back and thanking everybody so much for those really fantastic questions, Anita, to really gain some insight with that situation. Having had that taster of action learning, and it was just a taste, imagine what that might be like if you had several leaders in a meeting working together in that way over a period of meetings. I'd be really interested to hear from you. How do you now think action learning would be helpful for leaders? And a very strong thank you there from our presenter, Anita, for really wonderful questions. So having experienced that and with your own knowledge, how do you think action learning could be helpful for leaders? So Nicola's saying it's okay to be vulnerable and not to know everything. It reminds me of something which Reg Revens, who invented action learning back in the 1940s, said, action learning is about sharing our ignorance, not our cleverness. That it offers impartial thinking time, Fiona says. Not rushing in, taking time, creating a safe space. And Annabelle's echoing that it would be very helpful for anyone in a leadership position. Yeah. Thinking about things from many angles, that's so true. A lot of your comments are really resonating with what our participants in action learning at Lloyd's said earlier on about what they were getting from it. Again, there are further thoughts coming on this in terms of how you think action learning could be leaders. And while you're keeping those thoughts coming, I'd just like to go back to the slides and share with you just some of the uses of action learning for leaders that we know of at Action Learning Associates. So Julie, if we could go back to the slides. These are just some of the ways that we know action learning can work well for leaders. Cross-organisational, so when you have people working together from different organisations. We've got that with our project because the charity chief execs all run different charities. And an even more exciting and challenging process can be to work with people from different sectors. And again, we have that where we've got leaders from business, charity, and public sectors working together. It really is great for challenging your thinking. We can get very used to being within a certain mindset that's reflected by others around us. Being challenged by someone who comes from a different place can be really powerful. We often see action learning being used as part of a blended leadership development program where there are some workshops, but also the chance for people to bring along their real work issues. It can be really powerful at career transition points. So I've worked specifically with people who are new into their leadership position, where they're on a steep learning curve. We've run action learning on a specific theme. So one example of a themed action learning group was where the theme was about commissioning within the public health and social care sector. And we had people from different organisations, but who were all interested and involved in some way in the process of commissioning services. And finally, for supporting any kind of organisational change, particularly around a restructuring or a merger, it can be really powerful for the leaders of that change to come together and figure out how are we leading effectively through this change? What more could we do? Again, coming back to that engaging leadership model that we looked at earlier on. So we're moving towards the end of our time together. I'm going to be inviting some more thoughts from you before we go. But I just wanted to share with you this very powerful reflection from one of the chief execs who was involved in our Lloyds Foundation project. She runs a charity for people who are homeless with substance misuse issues. And she said this about the action learning. As a leader, it can be hard when you're so busy to give yourself permission to take time out to do this. Please trust me that it is not a luxury. It is worth every second. You'll leave feeling more effective and feeling refreshed. I recommend it very highly. And that was a real testament, the fact that leaders show up to action learning and carve that time out of their incredibly busy work and home schedules, I think demonstrates that it's worth it because it works. If people don't get something of value from it, there are a million other things that they can do. But when we run leadership action learning, what we see is people really showing up and deepening their knowledge of themselves and their organisation as a result. So I just want to ask you before we go, any final reflections that you would like to share on this process? And if there are any questions that come up for you, I will do my very best to give a 1-minute answer. So open space now to type in any final reflections or questions. Oh, thank you, Jonathan. And thanks to Anita too, of course, without whom we wouldn't have had the session.